Hello, I am Matty Dalrymple, and welcome to my interview series on From Expertise to Authority, where I talk to people who have succeeded in building their professional presence for a sideline, second act, or solopreneur career. And you can find more about my perspective on moving from expertise to authority at the indyauthor.com/authority, and that's Indy with a Y, I-N-D-Y, on Substack at Matty Dalrymple and at my Matty Dalrymple YouTube channel. And today, my very first guest for this interview series is Angelique Fawns. Hey, Angelique, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Maddie, and I'm so happy to be here. I've been
I'm
following your Indy Author Podcast, and I get so many good details out of it. So I'm thrilled to be on the other side of the mic.
excellent. Well, thank you for saying that. And for anyone who does not yet know Angelique, Angelique Fawns has a Bachelor of Journalism from Carleton University in Ottawa and almost 30 years of experience as a commercial producer. She's the author of 3 guides featuring the speculative fiction market, creates a horror fiction podcast called Read Me a Nightmare, and has sold over 100 short stories. And you can find her fiction at Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, Amazing Stories, Dream Forge, and a variety of anthologies. And so we were chatting a little bit before I hit record about this idea of moving from expertise to authority. And what I love about your story, Angelique, is that you went from what would seemingly be a separate kind of career, commercial production, into becoming an authority in the short fiction arena. So I just love to start out hearing about how you started that move from expertise to authority.
All right. Well, this story it's interesting. I'd always wanted to write short fiction and was a huge fan of like the Stephen King anthologies, Dean R. Koontz, any anthology with short stories that were horror, thriller, speculative. I always, Isaac Asimov's I Robot series of short stories, loved them. So, but you're in your life, you've got a busy day job, you don't have time, right? And I always thought, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And tomorrow never came until, drum roll please, I tripped over my dog and broke my ankle. And then and I couldn't drive to work, and I live on a farm and have a big commute. So I ended up being basically forced to sit still. What better time to start writing short fiction? And that's when I dove in. But then it's so difficult because you write a story and what do you do with it? I had no idea. And I didn't even know what resources were out there. I looked, and the first thing I found were contests, which are, of course, pay to play. So in my first year of writing, so I was out for, I guess it took 2 months for my ankle to heal before I could drive again. And I wrote tons of short stories and sent them to contests because that's the first things I sort of found on the internet. And I lost $1,000 and didn't make a single sale or win.
Yeah.
So that was very discouraging. So I thought there must be something better out there. So I started researching and I found the Dreamcasters. And they're a short story sort of writing group. And through them, I started learning about different markets. And I thought, well, why isn't there a list of markets out there for people to help them understand where they can send their work without paying? And so that's when I started compiling different markets. There's Clark's World, there's Amazing Stories, like all the top ones. And I used to read Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine growing up. So as soon as I found out that you could actually submit stories to them, I sent my very first written story to them and made a sale. And so that felt pretty
Oh,
fantastic.
that is
So that sort of
fantastic.
it is. So it sort of like launched my short story writing career. And then when I was doing the research, I thought, well, what you're supposed to do with a short story is you start with the highest paying market, and then you go down, right? You start with the pro pay, and then you can go to semi-pro, and then you can go to token. And then eventually, I almost think you should give a story away before you let it molder in your drawers. But so what I did is I started compiling my research and put out my very first book, which was The Guide of All Guides, and it has 65 plus markets in it in order of pay. So I had something for myself to work with. And that's how that started.
So many questions. One is that I think that idea, there's so many stories where people make that move to what is their passion and what they eventually want to create a position of authority in, because there's that enforced moment where you have to do something different. Like it is always tomorrow, tomorrow. You hear so many stories of people who never wrote the book they wanted to write until COVID. and they were home and they didn't have anything to do. It's like the equivalent of breaking your ankle and having to be sitting on the couch and doing something with your mind. So if you were speaking with someone who you were hearing that kind of passion that they wanted to become an authority in something, become an expert in something, do you have advice that you share about don't keep waiting for tomorrow or don't wait to break your ankle?
Oh, absolutely. Here's what's interesting is I didn't actually truly start finding success until I started looking at where the intersections were between my passion and what I was doing. So, for example, part of the reason why I started my monthly lists is, which I'm actually known more for on Substack than I am even for my guides. I mean, I give those out, but that's not where I'm seeing my authority build. It's in my short story list. Is because at work, you know how you have a SharePoint? Like you have like a Angelique has to deliver her promos at this time. I have deadlines. You have your all your salient information on one document.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, if a SharePoint, and I used to be when I was doing my job, like their most efficient, fastest producer. That's what I hung my hat on. That's why I managed to keep my job in a hard to keep industry for as long as I did, was because I could always deliver on time, never missed a deadline. Thought, why can't I take the work ethic that I was using at work and transfer it to my short story writing? So those lists that you're seeing, those monthly lists that I put out on my Substack, those are my SharePoints. Those are all the stories I want to send my work to, what they pay, when I have to have them in by, and a few little hints to help me succeed in my sale. So that's actually what you're looking at when you see my lists. They're just my personal SharePoint. Now, of course, I've expanded. You know, I'll put stories in there for LGBTQ or neurodiverse or limited demographic calls that don't suit me. But now that I have a following, I then add them for my other people who might be able to use them.
Yeah, I love that idea that you're applying something from a seemingly very different career and finding a way to combine that with your love of short fiction to build this expertise. I think for me, the equivalent is organizational skills. So I was always the person who would organize the material in my corporate life and also connect people. So interestingly, I had at least two managers individually call me the team's glue.
No, I
I
love
think
that.
they meant it in a nice way. It sounds weird, but I realized that idea of connection and seeing patterns and seeing relationships is something that I apply in other ways. And so I love that idea of trying to step back and look at what your sort of generic skill set is, and then how you can apply it to your area of passion.
Well, that's also the journalism, right? I have my degree from journalism, and what are lists like that, but research, compiling. And then also, to get those insights, I interview the editors and publishers of these magazines just to figure out, why did you buy my 3 calendar story for Ellery Queen? Like, what was it about that story that I was able to make a pro sale right out of the gate? So I interviewed Janet Hutchings, and then I had Janet Hutchings sort of give me, and she, oh my God, what a wonderful interview she was. She's recently stepped down, and Jackie Sherbo has stepped up as editor, and then I interviewed Jackie to see what was going to be different now. And I find like my interviews seem to get a good reaction, because of course people want to know. When you're just sending your stories blindly out into the world, it feels like such a crapshoot. But then if you know that some magazines will never buy a zombie story, that helps you. Or Dreamforge, it's grimdark, that's not the right market. You're wasting your time, because Dreamforge only publishes hopeful stories.
Yeah, I think as somebody who has judged short fiction contests, I can attest to knowing the platform you're submitting to is super important.
It's
Um,
probably the number one most important.
yeah. Yeah. I also like the idea of niching down so that if you were to pull way back from your experience in your career, you could say like writer, and then niching down further is like short fiction writing, and then niching down further is short fiction outlets, and then niching down further is short fiction outlets that you won't go broke on. And so that idea of becoming an expert in a very specific area, I think is fantastic, because then, how many people out there in the world are the authority or trying to vie for being the authority in that very specific area? Not very many. And so if you can get word out about your authority and expertise in that area, you own the audience for that. And then it also makes it that much easier to collect the information you need to even deepen your authority further by, for example, interviewing people about what appealed to you about this story. What is your platform looking for? I think that's a great tip.
Oh, it's so true. And then I always feel it's funny. I'm very shy about selling myself. I'm much better at like marketing other things as opposed to myself. But I find my blog, A, because I offer it for free, so it's not really selling. But B, it's like I meet a short story writer. I'm like, you need this. You paid how much subbing? You've made 0 sales. And then, sometimes I'll do a review for them. I'll be like, you're a wonderful writer. Like this stuff should be out there. Use my list. You'll know the open calls. And my number one rule, because of my background of starting with contests and losing so much money, is we do not pay to submit, which is basically paying somebody to reject you. Let's be honest here. We do not pay to submit, and we always sub to paying markets. I think you need a baseline, right? Because you need some focus.
Yeah.
And so I find that's also what I hang my hat on, because I found nothing more frustrating than when I was first looking to find places to send my work, because I'd find a list and then you'd click through to the website and then you'd read what the website says. Then you'd find out it's a $30 submission fee, or you'd find out they're not a paying market. And I'm like, well, I just want to sub to no fee paying markets. And I could not find a resource out there that focused solely on that, which was another reason which I created. I scratched my own itch, right? This is what
Yeah.
I really wanted. So I made it. So then when I meet other writers at some writing conferences now, which I started going to, I'm like, oh my God, you've got to check out my blog because it's going to help you. And it's
Yeah.
free. Win-win.
Yeah, I think it's a great illustration of also understanding why you're pursuing a position of authority, because having judge contests, I understand why sometimes there have to be submission fees, because otherwise people would just send, like, I might as well send in all 100 of my stories. Why not? And I have decided to pursue some contests, not because I'm looking necessarily to earn money from them, although that would be great, but because I do a lot of talks on short fiction. And I would love to have something on my bio that said that I was a short fiction contest winner. So to me, it's kind of like an investment to find reputable. I mean, I think that's another great thing you offer, to help find reputable contests with low submission fees that are commensurate with me pursuing what I want, which is ideally to win a contest and be able to add that to my bio. And so I can imagine a whole other person who spins up a list that would be, here are reputable paid platforms that are going to give you the prestige you're looking for if that's your end goal of building up that authority.
Absolutely. Well, there are some contests that are worth it. Like, for
Mhm.
example, the CBC Short Story Prize. I mean, if the feather in your cap is big enough, it's probably worth it. Well, I mean, some contests are free too, like Writers of the Future. That's probably the best premier #1 contest for short story writers out there. One of the things I say is there's nobody else out there who's going to make a bigger fuss over your short story than us. And I think that's absolutely true. So,
Yeah. Yeah, there are all sorts of benefits there, like not only the promotional and prestige benefits, but the networking benefits. I've heard about some of the perks the winners of that contest get. It's very impressive.
yeah. So anyway, so that's why my list is there for people, just to help you sort out the noise.
Yeah. Well, another thing you said that I really liked is the idea of being a little bit uncomfortable about marketing, but not feeling uncomfortable when what you're doing is recommending a free resource to someone that you know is going to be of value to them. And I think that's can sometimes be, that idea of having to market oneself can be such a barrier to people when they want to build that authority, and framing any kind of marketing really as not buy this, but genuinely being able to say, I have value to offer you. And maybe it's free, but maybe it costs something. But ensuring that what you have to offer validates the cost that you're asking for it, and that it's, you're offering value, you're not pushing a product, I think is a super important mindset to get into.
I'll tell you what else I do, Maddie, for my friends. And now that you're my friend, I can do this for you too. One thing I like to do for my author friends, and I've done it for Michael LaRon and quite a few authors that I've met, is I will interview them when they're running a Kickstarter. So then instead of always being support my Kickstarter, you can then be like, oh, here is an interview that talks about my novel and my process. And by the way, there's a link to the Kickstarter. right? And then that way it's a way to market a Kickstarter without always going, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, which of course it gets very old to hear all the time. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that I use my blog for as well, is to help friends, right? When Mark had his Kickstarter, we talked about One Hand Screaming, and it's so fun. And then you can learn along the way because everybody
Yes.
has so much interesting knowledge, especially those authors who've managed to eke out a full-time living. There's so much knowledge and true life experience there that we can learn from. And honestly, once again, it's scratching your own itch. I want to hear how you're doing it. I would love to be you. I'm trying to extend my short fiction, and I'd like to have a few novels out there in a continuing series, and you've done it. And that's phenomenal. And I need to know how.
Yeah. As I'm illustrating by all the questions I'm asking you, any kind of conversation you have with someone else in your general area is going to, I think, benefit both the
Yeah,
people
no, it's
involved.
true. It's true.
And I also think you're bringing up another great point for people who are looking to make this move from expertise to authority, which is that generous sharing of your content is not going to undermine your authority. It's going to support it. And so one piece of advice I always give, for example, to nonfiction writers, they have written a book about writing short stories, let's say, and now they're looking to get podcast guest appearances. And sometimes you encounter people who are like, well, I don't want to tell them too much because I don't want to give away all the information in my book. And I'm like, dude, you can tell them every single thing that's in your book and you're not going to cannibalize your sales. If sales is what you're going for, you can you can tell them everything and people are still going to buy your book. And I think that can also be very comforting and goes to this a spirit of generosity, the mindset of generosity as a important foundation of building authority, because people will trust you and follow you because you're sharing generously, but they will support you by buying your book or spreading the word or helping to get you speaking engagements or whatever that goal is.
That is so interesting. Can I share something with you?
Yeah.
And this is something I haven't shared anywhere else, so this is a breakdown session. So one thing that I've always been terrified of is truly letting my freak flag fly in the horror genre. I love horror. Most of my stories end up in horror. I consume horror. But because my day jobs and my part-time jobs are writing journalism, I've always been afraid to I write about zombies and how you can sell your chickens on a farm, right? I've always been afraid that I'm going to lessen my chances of freelance journalism writing if I truly let the world know that I'm a horror fanatic and that I love dark fiction, dark hopeful fiction. I'm not into grim dark splatterpunk, but I mean, I really do enjoy processing the world around us and all the horrors in the world and then figuring out a way to cope with it. So a lot of my stories are just processing my own whatever's stressing me out or something I see sad in the world, and then I can take it, rework it, and then make it positive. Like a zombie story where my zombie sucks up negative thoughts and turns the person that they ate their brains into a nice person. Like I love stories like that.
That's great.
And I'm just now just for example, on LinkedIn, I'm sharing my horror stories, and on my Free Friday fiction on my Substack, I'm letting my darkest stories go out into the world, and shock of all shocks, I'm actually getting more traction, and more people it seems to be I'm reaching more people the more authentic I am. So being afraid to let people know who I truly am and holding back sharing sort of my favorite stories that might be a little too dark is the wrong path. It's okay to just be yourself. It's okay to just truly let the world know what you truly want to do because it's not going to happen if not. And if I really want to be a dark fantasy horror writer, and that's my true passion, and which is why I'm doing all this research, and which is why all my lists seem to focus on speculative, dark, swinging fiction, why am I afraid to let it all hang out? Like why do I only pretend to know so much when I know more and I have more and I write more?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It kind of suggests that the people out there that we're reaching are more understanding of the well-roundedness of their fellow humans than we give them credit for. And that someone who is reading a magazine that has both your How to Sell Chickens article and your dark, hopeful but dark fiction is not necessarily going to see those as like schizophrenic or something like that. That
Right. You're
people
right.
are not only accepting of, but looking for the kind of holistic view that letting your freak flag fly gives them.
I think so. Well, it's interesting too. So the first story I sold was 3 calendars to Ellery Queen. The second one I sold was something called Death Metal Fan, and it's dark. It used to be up for free on Haunted Montreal. I only got paid $2 for that one, but it's interesting. That $2 seems to have gotten me more recognition, comments. Almost every writer that I end up talking to and become friends with, they'll be like, "Yeah, your other stuff is good, but my favorite was your Death Metal Fan," which is about a possessed fan that sends evil messages to its owner, and she goes out and, like, starts killing people and having wild sex because she's inspired by violence, and it's just this kooky, crazy, dark journey. And in the end, of course, because I always like a positive, it's like redemptive murdering. She's killing bad guys, and she's exacting revenge on the evil people in the world because this filthy floor fan is telling her to. But people are like, "That's my favorite story from you. I absolutely loved it." Almost like between you and me, that stuff, that's the good stuff. And you're like, "Okay, so let people know about the good stuff. Even if you're afraid they'll think you're strange."
Well, I like the idea of getting a $2 bill and writing the title of the story on it and then having that be like the banner image for your social media presence for a little while.
That's a great idea.
And wouldn't that be fun?
Yes. Now I gotta find a Canadian $2 bill. That would be challenging.
Oh,
We
well, yeah,
have we have
I'll have
toonies
to mail you
now.
one from the US.
Yeah.
Not many of them floating around, but they are out there. So as you were going through all these seemingly sort of disparate experiences, what is that moment when you realized that you had achieved a level of authority in your area?
So this is interesting. I didn't really know about writing conferences. Once again, I was doing all this research, but I hadn't really landed on writing conferences. And then I saw superstars writing seminars and you could apply for a scholarship. And I thought, well, why not? Because I couldn't justify flying. I'm in Toronto, right? North of Toronto, and it's in Colorado, and it would be prohibitively expensive. And I thought, but what the heck? I'll just apply for the scholarship, and I got it. So Superstars, you know about Superstars writing
I do,
seminars?
yeah.
Run by Kevin J. Anderson, like a very serious into the business seminar for writers.
Mhm.
And a lot of short story writers there, a lot of novel writers, indie, traditionally published. So when I showed up to this writing seminar, the very first one I ever went to in Colorado, the other side of the continent for me, so many people knew me. Angelique Fawns. I remember one lovely girl. She was absolutely wonderful. And then so many people would stop me. "I love your blog. Thank you so much for what you do." And I had no idea really that anybody was reading the thing. I would put it out in the world, but I had no idea that I had followers because it was just through my own website. And I really don't pay much attention to Google Analytics. But yes, I was known and people were appreciating what I was doing. And they were asking me questions as though I was an authority. And I was just like, wow, it never even occurred to me that my little passion project where I was putting the information out in the world was actually touching people and actually helping people. And it was a pretty wonderful moment, like a defining moment for me, really. That entire seminar was life changing for me as an author. And I started doing some Canadian ones. I went to DreadCon, which was phenomenal because I got to meet Kelly Armstrong. Love, love, love. And then I also and because Mark Leslie and told me I should go, and I'm so glad I did. Once again, met so many wonderful people, and people seemed to know me there and appreciate what I was doing, so that was great. And then you can also meet editors, right, and get set up for more interviews. And then I went to CanCon, which was another wonderful writing conference. So I would love to go back to Superstars, and I think I will in the future, but I've got others I want to try out first.
Yeah. Well, whenever somebody who had something like a blog makes that comment about, oh, look, people are actually on the other side of this, I always use it as an opportunity to encourage people that if you see a creator creating content that you are enjoying, let them know because it really helps. I say that as a podcaster. I can go for weeks without hearing from a listener, but then just as I'm thinking, oh, there's nobody out there, regardless of what stats say, I'll get a note from someone or run into someone at a conference, exactly as you're saying. But I do think that a lot of the ways that people establish authority are these potentially one-way experiences. They write a book, or they write a blog, or they do a podcast, or they're writing articles, or they're doing these things where they're sending things out into the world with not that kind of automatic way of getting feedback. The way you would, for example, if you were a speaker. If you're a speaker, you're standing in front of people. Hopefully you're being able to see their reactions, see how crowded the room is, what have you. But looking back, do you think that there are steps you could have taken to get that, like that validation that what you were putting out there was valuable even before you went to Superstars? I'm curious myself about this.
So, in all honesty, when I moved my blog to Substack, actually, when I lost my job at, Chorus because they were letting people go, it was a bit of a shock because I was at home and I'm like, well, I better start. I was paying to host my podcast. I had over 1,000 people on my newsletter now, and they're going to start charging me at MailerLite. So I was trying to condense my costs, and I found Substack. Now, once I got on Substack, because there's a discoverability within the app, my subscribers blew up. I have more than triple the amount of people following me. Even a few people support me, which is so wonderful financially, even though I offer 90% of my content for free, which is very validating that they, believe in it, what I'm doing enough and it's helpful enough that they'll throw me a few dollars every month. I think that's absolutely wonderful. But also Substack does the podcast for free. Substack gives you stats for every post so you know, and then people can talk to you directly through the messages and they can comment on the blog. That's why I moved there. And the
Yeah.
rest, I just moved to Substack to save money. But the fact
Yeah.
that you don't have to pay for your newsletter,
Yeah.
the fact you can get your podcast hosted for free, it's like, for me, it's another game changer, right? Like, what a wonderful platform. And so far, everybody's been so nice and supportive, and I've met some wonderful people. So I love it.
We were talking a little bit about the different outlets that are out there. You're obviously already tapping into this idea of sharing your work in articles on a platform, Substack, that makes it easy for many people to find and get to. But I can also see teaching and speaking as being a great outlet. And if your goal is income earning, which is perfectly reasonable, then options that focus on virtual speaking and teaching are ideal, because my experience has been you don't necessarily get paid less for a course that's being done online as you do if you show up in person. And it's a lot less expensive.
Oh,
Like,
that's interesting.
yeah, as
Hey,
soon as you go on the road for anything, it's going to cost you, and the costs of travel, even if the sponsor or the organizer or the host is ostensibly paying for your travel, they're paying for your hotel or paying for your plane ticket or whatever, that's great. But there are always going to be expenses that you don't get covered, and those can very quickly eat into any payment you get as a speaker. But I think those would all be great options for you. You have such a pleasant and engaging and enthusiastic persona that I think that would really lend itself well to online teaching.
that's
Yeah.
exactly the direction I'd like to go in 2026.
Yeah.
Because we had talked earlier, one of my last posts was about how I did take a job that was income replacing, but then it was detracting me too much from my passion. So I recently left the job because it was difficult. I didn't want to write about shootings and dead children and war. I want to write, unless it's horror and I can make a positive ending, but I
Yeah.
cannot control the conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's another plus for the idea of parlaying expertise into authority as a sideline when you need some outlet or relief valve or whatever it is from the thing you need to do 9 to 5 or full time to pay the bills.
exactly. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, if one is going to be an authority in something, it would be lovely to make it pay the bills.
Yeah.
So that's the step I haven't taken yet, right?
Well, I do think that for anyone who is in a kind of solopreneur in a creative field, then the multiple streams of income is key, because I have definitely made more money from the activities that I've been able to participate in as a result of my nonfiction books than I have from the nonfiction books themselves. And so I have a book about short fiction, not the
Which is
craft
great,
side, but the business
everybody.
side.
Taking the short tack is amazing. I
Thank
just
you.
thought I'd put it out there. As a short story authority, I can say it's a great book.
Thank you. Thank you. But I've definitely made more money by writing articles about short fiction, giving talks about short fiction, hosting classes about short fiction. So, yeah, I think that if income earning is a goal, as it is for many of us, then looking across all the different outlets where you can share that authority, build that authority, and share that expertise is key.
Absolutely. And that's interesting. Here's another point. We shouldn't be afraid to get paid as well. Well, I'm talking about fears here. What is it that makes artists often think they shouldn't be paid for their art?
Yeah.
I think that we should. Short story writing is a valid. I mean, oh my God, can we really talk here? There is, there is such a need for IP out there. We're all watching Netflix, Black Mirror, all these short story series. There is money out there. I remember attending the Blackstone presentation at Superstars, and they're like, we need your IP. Like, there is so much room out there, and there's such a need for what we do. It's just, how do we navigate the path to get from, for example, how do we make the jump from novel to film or from short story to television series? And I know this is like a very tough and difficult path to get on, but people do it, and there is a need for it. And with the amount of streaming and amount of programs being produced and the amount of stories getting optioned, like look at Jonathan Mayberry, he's had all of his stuff optioned. It can be done. And there's no reason why you, Maddie, and I, Angelique, can't do it. This is what I want to research. This is what I want to bring to the world and find out for myself. There is a way to make money at this. And you've helped me so much today by telling me about the options of how to diversify my streams of income. But then there's also these other highly lucrative streams of income, right? Robert Sawyer told me that he made more writing for television than he ever made writing his books. And we all know Robert Sawyer is the Canadian Dean of science fiction. He's phenomenal. Like, he's amazing, right? But I mean, it's interesting. There are those paths out there. We just have to find them.
Yeah, and that idea that becoming an authority in a particular area, we had talked about niching down before. There's the value of niching down, and then there's the value of then like opening up the funnel and saying, okay, I'm an authority in this very specific area. Now, how could that be a stepping stone to starting to build expertise in another area? Again, this is not going to be a goal for everyone, but it's an option for people. And I also love the idea that you're saying we as creative deserve to be paid for what we do. And
Yes.
I just over the last year finally made this decision about I really can't afford to keep going to in-person events unless, first of all, I'm being compensated sufficiently for it, or there's some other value I'm getting out of it. Like it might be a conference that I want to go to anyway, and just accepting an engagement that gets my registration paid for could be fine because it's an investment I would make anyway. But last year or earlier this year in 2025, I just started being much more selective about the engagements I took, especially in-person engagements, and did have an email exchange with an organizer who invited me to speak. And I said, thank you. How much are you going to pay me? And she told me, it's like, I'm greatly shortening up this. And I said, I'm sorry, I just can't do it for that amount. And she was very gracious about it. She said, I wish we could offer more. And I totally understand where you're coming from. So people do understand that this is not something that should be done for free. And they do understand that there are financial realities that have to be faced when creators are making these kind of decisions. Yeah.
Right. And it's okay to have that conversation, and it's
Yeah.
okay to ask. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is maybe my own personal thing, but that asking to be paid for my time feels, once again, it's very difficult. That marketing of self versus marketing of other.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be a hurdle for many of us. And if you're one of those writers who has that hurdle, you're not alone. Okay, maybe when you're starting out. Now, I'm not saying what's to short story writers, I'm not saying when you've written your first short story, you should only accept a professional market, and that's the only thing that'll be good enough. I think that when you're first starting out, you should absolutely write for, the $2, the $5 markets, just to get your name out there, to get some confidence, to learn how to work with editors. There's a lot of value. But if you're like you and I, and you're sort of at a point in your career where I've sold over 100 short stories and many of them pro pay, then it doesn't make sense for me to sell that story now for the $2, like my first death metal fan story.
Yes.
But it did a lot for me, and it helped me build my career, and I learned so much, and I was able to interview the founder of Haunted Montreal, who was quite the character. And it was fun, right? There's so much to be said, but then you've got to realize too, you get to a certain point and there's only so many words you can write, and it is better to be paid for them.
Yeah, well, this whole theme about niching down and then expanding out, I love this. I think this is going to be after I've noodled on this a little bit, this could be a whole other conversation, but we
Yes.
do need to do a part 2. We absolutely do. Well, I think we already have like 2 parts here. There might be part 3.
That's right.
Well, this has
It's
been
fun.
Yeah, it's so fun, Angela. Thank you so much for being my guest to talk about moving from expertise to authority. And I know people are going to be interested in finding out where they can connect with you after this conversation. So please let them know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Okay, well, the easiest way is probably my personal website, which is www.fawns.ca. And if you're huge on Facebook, I do have an author page on Facebook. And then Substack, of course, if you're
Of
familiar
course.
with the platform. If you just type in Writing and Selling Stories with Angelique Fawns, or even just my name, it'll come up. And then join my newsletter and find out where you can send your stories, because I have a great list. Paying no fee markets.
Perfect. You're very nicely defined area of authority for sure.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks, Angelique.
Okay, thank you.